When Sandra Day O'Connor was a little girl, growing up on the vast and majestic Lazy Bee Ranch, she asked her father, "Daddy, why don't we go to church on Sunday?" And Mr. Day answered, "Well, church is too far, and the preacher's no good." And he said, "Church is all around us here." In Washington, Justice O'Connor found her church. On many Sundays, she read scripture in the Bethlehem Chapel here at the National Cathedral. But her temple, you might say, was the white marble building on First Street Northeast. When she got to the Supreme Court in September 1981, she was the first woman justice in our history in 200 years. On TV, millions watched a handsome, self-possessed woman with a gap-toothed smile disarm the senators, all of them male. The vote to confirm her was 99-0. The headline on the cover of Time magazine read, "Justice at last." The law, like much else in our society, had long been dominated by men. Sandra Day graduated near the top of her class at Stanford Law School and was able to get only one job interview at a law firm. But not for a lawyer's job. The lawyer interviewing her asked, "How well can you type?" She was never bitter. She went to the local DA's office and asked if she could work there. "I have no money to pay you," the DA said. "I'll work for free. I don't have any space for you. I can sit with your secretary." He hired her and eventually even paid her. And so on she went, never looking back, never looking down. Returning to Arizona, she was elected the first woman majority leader of a state senate anywhere in the United States. Not all the men were glad to see her. I asked a longtime Senate staffer how she did it. He answered, "She was smart. She was also brave, and importantly, she knew how to listen." When Sandra Day O'Connor arrived at the U.S. Supreme Court, she found the place to be cold, and not just because she missed the Arizona sun. At the court's weekly lunches, only about half the justices showed up. So she made it her business to make the justices come to lunch. Not to talk about cases or argue over the law, but to get to know each other. If they didn't go to lunch, she would go to their chambers and just sit there until they did. When Justice Clarence Thomas came on the court, he later told me, he didn't much feel like going to lunch. But after conference, Justice O'Connor would walk with him down the hallway saying, "Clarence, you need to come to lunch." So finally, as he told me, I started going to lunch. He felt he belonged. He said, "She was the glue. The reason this place was civil was Sandra Day O'Connor." Justice O'Connor, who had rounded up cattle as a teenage girl, expected you to do your job thoroughly and without complaint. One of her law clerks taped on the wall a photocopy of Justice O'Connor's hand with this message: "If you want a pat on the back, lean here." She was tough, and she could be, as she called herself, bossy. Every year, she marched her clerks off to look at the cherry blossoms, even when it was 40 degrees and raining. She took them on fishing trips, and when she caught a really big one, she would yell, "Hot diggity dog!" She was actually modeling a balanced life, recalled one of her clerks. Make time for your family, take care of yourself, get exercise and experience the outdoors, have a sense of the wider culture. The clerk said, we were getting not just an apprenticeship in law, but in life. She was never small-minded. The justices can be critical of each other and their opinions. She didn't do that. When one of her clerks included a sharp rejoinder in the draft opinion, she looked up and said, "A little snippy, aren't we? and crossed it out. She knew how to be selfless. In 1996, in United States versus Virginia, the court ruled that state schools could not exclude women from admission. It was a landmark case in women's rights. Justice Stevens, who was the senior justice in the majority, assigned the court's opinion to Justice O'Connor as the court's first woman and for 12 years, the only woman on the court. She said no. This should be Ruth's case, she said, turning to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Justice Ginsburg later told me, I loved her for that. In 24 years, Justice O'Connor cast a decisive vote in some 330 cases. That's a lot of power. Some pundits began writing about the O'Connor court. But that's not the way she looked at it. She did not like being called the swing vote. She would say, that sounds fickle. Rather, she came to view the court as not the all-powerful last word, but as an institution that is engaged in an ongoing conversation with other branches of government, legislators, executives, federal, state, local. She had an uncanny feel for where the country was on difficult issues like abortion rights, affirmative action, and religious freedom. She knew that when progress comes, it should be careful, thoughtful, considered. She knew this from her own experience. It's good to be first, she told her clerks, but you don't want to be the last. How happy she was to see 4 women justices on the court. She also told her clerks, never be above taking care of people. In 2005, at the height of her power, she decided to leave the court to take care of her beloved husband, John, who had Alzheimer's. She explained, he sacrificed his career for me. Now, she said, it's my turn to sacrifice for him. She was devoted to the rule of law, and she was relentless about spreading the word, traveling all over the globe to do it. After she left the court, she made a crusade of teaching civics to school kids. The program she created, iCivics, now reaches middle schoolers by the millions. Civics, civility, the rule of law. She had a kind of civic religion. Not just the law that is written down, but the unwritten rules of fairness and decency in the way we should treat each other everywhere and always. How lucky we were that she was the first. How much we miss her.